Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. Okay, so I don't look at the photographs beforehand until I speak with the person, and I'm bringing it up. And okay, so
what's the first one?
It's perfect. It's yummy. It's so good. Okay, so usually what I do is I describe it because it's a podcast about photographs.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that's you because it's in the bright noonday sun, leaning on some beautiful rock. There is nothing green around you. So in the background is like rock face. I mean, is that sandstone or is that
Yeah. So what you are looking at is a small piece of the beautiful landscape of Moab, Utah, which is one of my all-time favorite locations and sort of a temporary transient residence for me during the time of my life where I was living nomadic. That is one of the ways that I started my career / life as a content creator. I had, sort of a really challenging situation. Like after graduate school, I got married and it turned out to be a really terrible situation, like domestic violence and all sorts of things. And I found myself, it was really like, a super massive disruption. And so instead of just carrying on in the same old manner that I had in the past, where it's like, okay, you go to work, you go to school, you try to make the things work. I just essentially broke all of those paradigms and I hit the road, right? It was me and a Jeep and a German Shepherd and a laptop. The German Shepherd shows up later in the photographic story because she's still around, right? She's a beautiful senior lady of 12 years old. But this is actually just from this year, returning to Moab, kind of going full circle, because it's just a place where any and all gypsies and travelers are welcome. And when I was a gypsy traveler, I always felt very welcome.
So you are okay. So just for the listener, okay. So the background is just some beautiful rock, essentially going up to the top of the frame, and it's like you're standing on a hill. It's a very strange composition in the sense that you're standing on what looks like polished rock that's quite bright and almost cream colored. And in the background is probably the same rock that's in a kind of shadow that's a lot redder. And so if somebody's seen images of Moab, they'll know a lot of what that stone is like. You're dressed like such a gypsy. It's crazy. It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
You've got a sports bra on. You've got like tights for what looks like rock climbing or jogging, and you've got like those aren't rock climbing shoes. So Moab is for rock climbing.
Are trail runners, but
yeah. So Moab is known for rock climbing and for cycling for sure.
Yes, I do. That's one of the things that I definitely got into when I was there. It's something I've carried on with me through my adventures. And now as I settled down into Colorado, do a lot of rock climbing. And that really does allow you to see you really get deep into the mountains, deep into the wilderness, and you get to see how diverse nature really is.
Sure.
And that's something that I tried to represent sort of like, in my photographs, that like the beauty of nature exists in many different ways,
for
right?
Sure.
And also, that just because something isn't green, right, doesn't necessarily mean that it's
nothing
not
green in this photo.
Yeah. And it's also just ecologically a very important place.
Yep.
That is right near what is known as the Slick Rock area in a Moab State Park. And it is famous for essentially little micro ecosystems that emerge in the rocks as it rains and they collect little puddles. Each of those little puddles turns into a little pond with, its own, like plants and animals and all different things.
Super
and that's
fast.
able to support life.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people, they see the desert and they think, oh, it's bare and it's desolate and it's empty. And honestly, nothing could be further from the truth. It's very alive.
Okay. Oh, Sam, I love it. Okay. So okay. So we, of all the library and potential places to start, you picked this one. Why launch your narrative or call this a biographical review or a presentation of what's important for you, important ideas, important themes, whatever it is, why start with this image that shows you in an inhospitable place, looking totally alive, looking happy, looking a little sunburnt, but yeah. So what? Why start there?
Well, I think everyone could empathize with the idea of different phases of our lives. And many of us, different phases of our lives are connected to different locations.
Sure. Okay.
Um, and so for me, this phase of my life really did start in Moab. And, as you observed, it looks inhospitable, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it looks rough and challenging and difficult. And during that phase of my life, yeah, it was rough and it was challenging and it was difficult. But still, it was just so rich and so beautiful and so free. And I think that those things are both represented here, right? Like, yes, it looks like a very harsh environment. Yes, I am sunburned, but it's still, I'm having an amazing time, because just because you might be physically uncomfortable in your surroundings doesn't necessarily mean that you're not exactly where you need to be.
Oh, for sure. So usually if you're traveling, gypsying, moving around, you're going from someplace. So where were you where were you before you got to Moab?
I lived in Vermont for
Oh,
several
wow.
years. That's
Okay.
where I got my law degree and my master's in energy regulation and my master's of laws in environmental law.
Kick
So that's really
ass.
where I know. Yeah, it was a long list. A couple of them were through like research fellowships and things where like, it came with like kind of tuition opportunities and whatever. But yeah, that's that the New England chapter was its own chapter.
Sure.
And there are certainly photographs that periodically appear in my feed from that time
Okay.
in my life. But it just seemed, even though it wasn't terribly long ago, because it was an entirely different chapter, an entirely different phase,
Yeah.
there isn't that same amount of attachment.
Right.
Right. It's like it doesn't have that same. I've been back to Vermont. I have visited friends there and been to places that were meaningful to me, but it still doesn't hold my heart and capture my
Right.
heart like the places that now feel
Yeah.
like home.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so did you move to Vermont from, like, is that where you're born? Like, were you born Northeast? Like, where?
I was born actually in San Diego,
Oh,
California,
wow.
and then I
Okay.
moved to Florida when I was very young, and that's where I was raised. I kind
Oh,
of had like a, slow beach surfer bum kind of
wow.
teenage life, and yeah, did really well in school. Always loved the outdoors,
Yeah.
loved being outside, loved plants and animals, and
Ended up
that's
in
really what
law.
led me to, huh?
Ended up in environmental law.
Yeah, exactly. I did not go to law school with ever any intention of practicing or litigating.
Right.
I really just always felt, from what I learned about my first degree is in economics, right? Like my
Okay.
bachelor's in economics, and there's just certain things that must be done to prevent harm to people from natural transactions, right? And one of those things is that we do absolutely have to keep our economy accountable for pollution,
Yep.
climate change, all of the poor waste management that happens. This is a natural consequence of the way that we've chosen to structure our society. And it's not a good or a bad thing. It's just that's really where I saw my passion fits, right?
Yeah.
I care deeply. I love to sit in nature. I
Yep.
love to be outdoors. I love to be with animals. And how do I make that like my contribution to the world? Well, I do what I can to, sort of fill the gaps where the things that we do may not be so great for the environment.
This is food. For me, this is like a nourishing meal. This is great. So in terms of the podcast that for some background, there are four kind of emerging themes. One of them is creative expression. So I get a lot of photographers and artists. One of them is conservation, because I'm a big conservationist and I'm connected to a lot of conservation people. One of them is service leadership, which is so, for example, in a school, in a law firm, in a family, the connection between people is what we call service, right? Like service isn't customer service in our minds. In our minds, service is just the connection between people. Like right now, you're giving me a service as a inspiring, brilliant guest on my podcast, and I'm giving you a service of hopefully being a good, engaging host or whatever.
Mhm.
So service leadership is a big something I've spent about 15 years on, and one of them is strong women. So you seem to fit the bill on many of the pillars, and I see that you're you suffer from being a massive underachiever.
I hear that a lot, you
I'm
know?
sure you do. I like it. I like it when you're laughing and I can see your tonsils. Then I know I said something kind of funny. Nice.
Got the real,
I love it.
the authentic cackle,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. I joke that I can't stop myself, you know? And it's, one of the things that I find myself saying often is, you know, if you love what you do, then you never work a day in your life. And
Right.
that's just something that I constantly reiterate to people, because I did start my career off as a young 20-something believing that it was putting one foot in front of the other so you climb the ladder to get to where you want to be. And
Right.
that's not my experience at all. My experience has been putting one foot in front of the other and following your passion and being true to yourself. And then you excel in that space.
Okay.
Right. You know, people ask me all the time, like, why did you write this book? And I said, well, you know, a lot of reasons. But fundamentally, it's because I care deeply about the environment,
Mhm.
and I am a perpetual, sometimes obnoxious optimist. And I do truly believe that, you know, armed with the same knowledge that I've had the opportunity to get through graduate school and through content creation contracts with tech companies and all these different things, that armed with that same knowledge and information, everyone can have a positive impact on the environment. And we can all together, through that service leadership orientation, right, you know, work together
Yeah.
to make a better life for all of us.
Sure.
Right. And it's, you know, it's super non-controversial, right? Nobody loves litter.
No, of
People
course.
do not like polluted water.
Right.
It's deeply upsetting. It's not necessarily, you know, people disagree on what and how and who you know, should fix it, but nobody disagrees that it should be fixed, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay, so I'm very far away from you at the moment. So I live in a country park with, at the moment, we have 4 dogs and 5 cats in the house. The country park is in Hong Kong, and I don't know if you've been to Asia, but super green, super amazing. And it's a difficult problem in a way. Not a problem, it's a hard problem that, for example, Hong Kong is so dense with people and is so full on capitalist oriented, right? And people trying to make money and all this stuff. But one huge blind spot people in our city, in this city has, is it's improving, but you know, when you say, oh yeah, people don't want pollution in their water and they don't want, you know, people don't want to see litter outside their door or whatever. And yet, you know, I agree with you completely. And yet the reality is, like, around me are people who just chuck their garbage out the window and they don't even think about it. And that's an education and awareness. So yeah, so I'm with you 100%, but I'm also a tireless optimist as well.
Yeah, because you know, just to your point, is the problem that they are chucking their garbage out the window and not thinking about it, or is the problem that they have not been provided with the infrastructure they need to manage their waste effectively, right? And the awareness that they need to know, you know, hey, like, this is what you do with it instead.
How dare you turn it around and with a really intelligent question? You're gonna expect me to respond to that? Jeez. Okay.
Well, there's actually a funny, a bit of an anecdote about the same thing that happened, you know, here in the United States. So the United States really became a disposal forward culture after World War II. That's when the plastic industry really started making affirmative moves to literally sell you every product wrapped in plastic, right? It's wrapped in garbage. The first thing you have to do whenever you open anything is throw something away, right? And that was done intentionally. Back the pre-World War eras, things were reusable.
Sure.
Diapers were washed and reused. Linen services came around and helped people with that. Milk, the milk was delivered. Every soda and every beer was sold in a refundable container.
Yep.
And we're just right now returning to that reusable culture because there was an intentional period of time where we were taught to throw things away.
Right.
We were shown, no. Don't reuse that milk bottle, buy it in a plastic jug and then throw that away, right? And so just as we have had to be trained away from reusing things to throwing things away, people again have to be trained back from throwing things away to reusing things, right? It's doable.
I'm sighing because I am really enjoying this conversation. Let's move on to the next photo. Wait. Before I don't want it to get lost. What's the title of your book? So we have to plug it.
Yes, plug the book. Please buy my book. It's self-published. It was all bootstrapped. It's called Be Decent: Environmental Activism 2.0. Be Decent is a play on words about decentralized technology. Okay. It's really about how, because as your point, original point, we have a camera on every single phone.
Yeah.
We can use that to capture information, whether it's about wildlife, whether it's about invasive species, whether that's about litter. Right. And just through participating in apps, through sharing on social media, we can make a really super positive environmental change.
Now, this is sorry, go ahead.
My mother has a really interesting anecdote. Just as I was telling her, about the book, some time ago, and she was like, "Oh, she lives down in Florida, where I'm from originally, and one of her commutes brings her right past a state park." And somebody at some point had dumped 16 bags of trash along the highway to the state park.
Sure.
And she saw, there was such an uproar on social media. So many people stopped and took photos and shared. So who did this? What was it that it actually sparked an investigation where it was both cleaned up and that person was cited for the illegal dumping.
Oh, fantastic.
Just because people stopped and said, no, this is not okay. I'm going to take a picture of it. I'm going to put it on Facebook and I'm going to tell all of my neighbors and all my friends that I think that this is not okay. And it actually, gained a lot of traction.
Wow. Okay. I love that I don't know where the conversation goes, and Be Decent. And then also the approach and the perspective and the sort of the point of view. Wasn't expecting it and really, really enjoying it. And as a conservationist, also so kind of going like, hey, that sparks some really interesting ideas in my head. But I also want to move on to the next photo. Good?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
And I just want to point out that obviously it's working because that's exactly what I want to do. I want to spark that thought in people's brains.
Yes. It's working.
Yes.
So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.